Buddhism's not about being perfect. I think it's about, are you willing to challenge, your current circumstances and, be yourself? And it's okay to realize there's a gap of maybe where we are right now and where we want to be. But, are we willing to put in the work to close that gap in that sense? And that we don't have to do any of that alone, actually.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Hi, Cassidy from Buddhability here. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. It'll help the show out, and you'll never miss an episode. If you want more Buddhability content, you can subscribe to our email newsletter in the link below. We put out great content every week. Enjoy the show. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Welcome to Buddhability, Kenichi. Thank you for
Cassidy.
joining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All the way from LA, which now
Yes.
I've already shared a little bit of your intro, but you're here in New York, and so we wanted to take the opportunity to interview you and hear about your story and also the things happening in your life, I'll say creatively right now. But just to start things off, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, thank you, Cassidy. It's great to be here. Big fan, Buddhability, huge fan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm Kenichi Hackman from Los Angeles. Grew up actually in a town called Torrance, California, but I found out very soon that when you leave LA, no one knows what Torrance is. So you kind of just have to say, I'm from Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I work for a wonderful nonprofit that I really believe in, based out in Santa Monica. And yeah, I have basically always been in the LA area. I went to college in Oregon and then moved back. So I've kind of always been a West Coast guy. And yeah, I think I have that SoCal slow, laid back kind of vibe. So that's me.
How are you doing in New York?
Actually, it's really great. I really like New York. I think the first time I ever visited New York, the first thing I noticed, I was like, wow, everyone walks with a purpose. Like everyone's got somewhere to be, and you can't hesitate. You have to kind of just go with the flow. It can be kind of overwhelming because, I drive everywhere. So I'm not really like surrounded by this many people walking all the time, but everyone's just like, they know where they want to go and they go. And so I've actually really appreciated that. It's kind of forces me to just make a decision and go, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I feel like that's what I really love about New York is I'm always somebody that is walking like 10 feet ahead of the people that I'm with. So I think maybe I'm meant to be in New York. But before we go deep into your life story, we need some important context setting. So you recently started a podcast with your friends called Enlighten Up Bro, which when I heard that, I loved it, I must say. I was like, oh, that's creative. So the kind of spirit behind it is that, a lot of people, I think especially young men, might think Buddhism is like flowery or touchy-feely, or you don't really need that like a kind of life philosophy. So before you started practicing, what was your own perception of Buddhism? And did you feel that way, or it was just like, I don't really need it?
That's a great point. Great question. I think so. My parents both practice Nichiren Buddhism. And so I grew up going to meetings and different activities or events with them, but I loved being outside. And so the idea of sitting down and chanting like a phrase that I don't really understand what that means for an extended period of time. And, when you're a teenager, extended period of time is 3 minutes or 5 minutes. It just didn't make sense. Like, how can this help me? So I would say before really getting into this practice and making it my own, probably my perception of Buddhism was the community aspect of it. Really great people and very open, and everyone seems very happy all the time. But I kind of also maybe felt like, well, you could find that anywhere. Like if you could find community kind of in anything. And so yeah, it kind of really took me not prioritizing that community until I realized how different it was. And maybe I can get into that a little later too. But yeah, so my perception of Buddhism was really about, I guess, friends and people I knew.
So you didn't start practicing until like right after college. So can you tell me what changed where you decided, actually, maybe chanting this thing I don't understand, maybe it will help me?
Yeah. So leading up to college, in middle school and high school, my parents split, right? And so I think that also maybe fed into me not really believing in chanting, because out of my friend group in school, I was the only one that was Buddhist, and I was the only one who had divorced parents. So I was kind of like, like Buddhism equals divorce, you know? Very small sample size of what my experiment was. But, out of, my group of friends, it's like I'm the only one that felt different. But I think for what it was worth, at a young age, I really recognized that my parents were always doing their best to try to be, to support me. And they never really forced me to chant or to practice Buddhism, but they always really encouraged me, like, it's a great way to start the day. Like, let's just do it before school, gongyo, or like reciting portions of the Lotus Sutra that we all do morning and evening, and then chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I tried to do that at least before school to start the day. So I didn't notice because I thought this is just how my life was. But high school was great. Like, I had a great time in high school. I was captain of the sports teams that I was on, basketball and volleyball. I was like the first chair drummer in the school jazz band, got A's and B's in pretty much everything, and was really friends with everybody. Maybe not everybody, but, like high school can be very cliquey, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like I was really cool with many different, I think because I was in band, but also basketball, volleyball, sometimes took honors classes, so I just like knew people from everywhere, and I just was really cool with all of them. So that was just to kind of give context to then college. So, I chanted to get into the school, University of Oregon, which is where I went. Go Ducks. Big love that school. But I stopped chanting once I got accepted and went there because my perception, I guess, also to go back to your first question, my perception of Buddhism was you only really needed to chant when you wanted things that like you didn't have.
Yeah.
Or when you have like a goal, like, okay, I want to get into this school. I got it. So now I don't need to chant. Mm-hmm. So everything I just explained about high school, it completely went 180 in college. And so, I went from like being an honor roll student to, it took me 5 years to graduate. And in 5 years, I almost got kicked out of the school because of grades 3 different times. So, like every year and a half or so, there'd be a quarter I would fall down. And so there was that, went from doing a lot of extracurricular activities like sports or band, clubs. I basically would try things in college, but I would get really kind of insecure, like, because my friends wouldn't also join or they would like require commitment, and I would kind of not want to commit, to something. So I kind of quit. Like I would start and quit, like many different things. And rather than being cool with everyone, I guess I'm always been a social person. So I still kind of had that, but kind of looking back, I was a different person depending on who I was like hanging out with. Like I was trying to fit some mold that these different kind of friend groups had. So I really lost who I was. And all of this kind of led me to becoming like this very angry guy. Not necessarily like physically violent angry, but just a complainer, kind of like can never really be happy. Even if something great happened to my friends, I looked at that as like something that didn't happen to me. So like everything really became about me and everything I wasn't doing. And so, yeah, I guess this came to like a tipping point right after I graduated. It was 4th of July weekend, and I was at my mom's house, and we had like friends over, right, for like a barbecue. I guess I was kind of like going on some rant about how like America sucks or something. And anyway, I was just probably just being such a downer, for the party. And my mom just kind of like interrupts me in front of everyone. She's like, "Man, you sound like a grumpy old man." And everyone laughed. And I was like so pissed, which I guess proves her point. But anyway, the next day after the barbecue, I kept like replaying that phrase Like, and then I kept thinking about high school actually, and how I was kind of like I was always the hopeful guy, like optimistic person. And then I realized, well, I was chanting then, even though maybe I didn't really know what I was doing, or I wasn't like studying our philosophy so in depth. It was very undeniable, the difference of when I was 18 versus when I was 23. During this time too in college, my mom and my stepdad, they moved to Portland, I think to be closer to me, but also they wanted to get out of LA and kind of restart. But I saw her really struggle at the beginning of this kind of transition. But every time I would visit her, she was always chanting. And in the 5 years I was at college, while it seemed like everything in my life was kind of like going down, like she was just really just crushing it, conquering goal after goal after goal, and really creating a great sense of community in this new city that she had moved into. And so I realized, like, wow, maybe I should really try this again, looking at my mom's example. And then of course my dad was always like stalwart. Like every time I'd go visit him, he would take me to a meeting. He's just, man, like, and he would always really encourage me, like, I have this great tool I could use, And so finally I was like, well, let me just give it a sincere shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least I can tell my parents I tried, and I can tell myself I tried something. And that's kind of why I started chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo consistently. And yeah, best decision I've ever made for sure.
Did you, after starting, see a shift in that like angry nature? And like what kind of things were you chanting about?
Yeah, so I visited, after I graduated, I visited my mom, or I lived with my mom for about 3 months, started to get my practice going. But I knew I was going to move back to LA. So I was still kind of on like vacation mode. So I was chanting, but I was like, I didn't have any stake in it, because I was just chanting just to chant.
Yeah.
Which I was feeling good. I had a great summer. But when I got to LA, I was like, okay, I need to get a job. Like my dad is not going to pressure me. But at the time, we were living in a very small apartment, and we wanted to be able to move into like a 2-bedroom. And so I was like, okay, I need to get an income so we can, because rent will go up and different things, bills will change. So I wanted to be contributive. My parents supported me through university, like very fortunate for that. But I just felt like it's time. I have to. So the first thing I was really chanting for was just a job, like I just want a job. I was just sending out resumes, and I would really chant that I could, like I was chanting that my resume would hit the right person when they're in the right mood. And they were all basically entry level kind of things, and some of them were part-time, some were full-time. But in that first month, yeah, I think I got 5 job interviews.
Oh, wow.
And 4 offers of the 5 interviews. So I was like doing pretty well. But actually beyond that, I noticed is I was just feeling better, like day by day. And instead of kind of just waking up with this grumpy attitude, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm gonna send out resumes today, like this is going to be the day. So I was like, wow, feels pretty nice, And so I think that's kind of the first things I really noticed is I was still living in the same place. I'm the same me, but it just felt like my life was colored differently, a little bit brighter. And yeah, and then, I got a job, which is what I was chanting for. And yeah, so it was pretty great.
Then after getting the job, I know like with some time, you started kind of getting more engaged in like your local Buddhist community. And we've talked about many times on the show, this is lay Buddhist community, meaning like there's no priests or clergy. We all just support each other. And as you got more involved, you started supporting other young men. And so I wanted to hear like what that experience was like, of like what it means to support somebody else as you're also kind of like figuring stuff out yourself.
I think even the decision to do it, like to support others or take on maybe additional responsibilities within our community. Because, on the surface, it can kind of seem like, well, I'm just going to volunteer some time, or like I'm going to volunteer and there is that aspect. But I think deep down, it's really we believe in cause and effect, and that a cause you make for anyone, yourself or others, like we're all connected, everything's connected. And so I just remembered thinking about all these people that really did support me. And, actually just to bring it back to college really quick, there was a SGI community, local Buddhist community in Eugene, Oregon, where my school was. And I think I went to maybe like 2 or 3 meetings in 5 years. Like it was, I was like a mythical creature probably to them. Like, oh, wow, he's here today.
He came out. Oh my gosh.
There was this one guy who hit me up to check in. And he would always ask if he could take me out to get a coffee or breakfast. And I was like I could never say no. So I always said yes, but I always then flaked on him or canceled the day of. And so then I started thinking about that guy, and I was like, wow, maybe I could be that for someone else, and not just be always kind of like taking, but like maybe there's something I could offer or like give to someone. I didn't know what that was, but I was like, let me, So anyway, yeah, I took on some responsibilities and supporting other young men, and it's really what's honestly, I think one of the main reasons why I still chant today, because I think up until that point, chanting was just something like was just for me. But when you make a decision to support another person, all of a sudden your life becomes a little bit bigger. Because now it's like, oh, I want to win in my life, not just for me, but so I can show my friends they can win too, or if your friend wins, it's a mutual, right? So just to maybe, if I could share like a story related to that. So a couple of years ago, my dad and I were going through some really intense like financial struggles. The pandemic happened, and then a couple of years after that, like into the pandemic, things are starting to kind of open up more. And my dad had shared really like how it was a really rough couple of years and gone through all his savings. And so basically in that one conversation, I became the sole source of income, for my father and I in Los Angeles. Maybe rent is not as high as New York, but it's still pretty high. And that time is when I started working for this nonprofit, and, we're there like for the mission, and we make livable money for one person, but I think to fully support both my dad and I just became a real challenge. And we were essentially a month behind all of our bills for like a year and a half. And our landlord would like always be on us. They would throw out the E word, that eviction word, like just to kind of like scare us. Right. And, so because of that, we didn't really have food most of the time too. So anyway, that's like the reality at home, right? And then at the same time, I think because of all the stress or like just kind of constant worry, I started to develop like these migraines that would keep me like bedridden every couple weeks. So I was like missing work, like the one thing that was supporting us. Like now I'm like not winning at my job, or I feel like I'm falling behind because I have to take days off. I was dating someone at the time, and we were just kind of going through like a rough patch. So just like every aspect of my life, I just felt like I was losing in. There was no part of my life where I felt like I could be an outlet for, or it was an outlet for me, except for the practice, But I think when I was really down in the trenches, I kind of like forgot I have this amazing tool. And so I decided like, I'm just going to blame my dad for everything, for my migraines, for my problems with my girlfriend at the time, for the lack of money, everything was his fault, which, spoiler, that's not a very Buddhist approach, but at this time I'm supporting other young men. Right. And I'm supporting in a community in LA that like, it's kind of pricey. And actually I didn't live in that community, but they all had very great jobs, made good money, or they live with their parents who are like, maybe not 1%ers, but I don't
Close.
know, 5%ers. And so I'm just like, man, what can I offer these guys? Like, they're going to think I'm like, they're going to look down on me if I'm behind on rent, or if I'm worried about, being unhoused. Like, they're just going to be like, why should we practice Buddhism, or why should we listen to this person? So I don't want to say like I hid it, but I didn't really bring it up, But at some point, it just got to this place where I had to talk to somebody about it. I was sharing with some other friends who were supporting me and giving me advice, but I felt like I couldn't really be a true friend to these other guys if I was kind of hiding like my struggles. So yes, we had this one meeting, kind of like a gathering for, younger guys, and everyone, it was really informal. I think we just sat in a circle and everyone just shared like a victory or a challenge. So everyone in the circle shared like a victory.
Oh no.
And then it got to me, and like then I just started crying, and I don't really cry, not to like sound like a tough dude. I just kind of like my mom that way, she doesn't really cry too much either, and I just let everything out. And I was so worried, like I was like, man, what am I doing? Like they're gonna like think, but they just all gathered and they were like, man, you've always been encouraging us to chant or, to support a meeting kind of behind the scenes, help organize these things. And to be honest, we thought like you never had any problems. So it was kind of hard to relate.
Wow.
But they were like so happy actually. And some of them actually then who had shared a victory kind of shared a challenge they were going through that I didn't know about. So it kind of showed me like Buddhism's not about being perfect. I think it's about, are you willing to challenge, your current circumstances and, be yourself? And it's okay to realize there's a gap of maybe where we are right now and where we want to be. But, are we willing to put in the work to close that gap in that sense? And that we don't have to do any of that alone, actually. And yeah, there's no hierarchy, just because I volunteer my time more than someone else doesn't mean one is more Buddhist or less Buddhist. Like we're all here kind of together. So I don't know, if that's a great answer or if that makes sense to what you're asking, but so I try to just be myself, I guess, know.
I think many of us place a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially when you're young and you're still trying to figure out like who you are, what you want in your life. It can feel like, oh, I have to be a certain way or I have to present myself a certain way. And when I was younger too, I actually never wanted to reach out to anybody and tell them when I was really struggling. And so it was really like shoved down. And then that also created this sort of like just deeper criticism of myself. Actually, my mom was the person that always absorbed all of my complaints. And one day she was like, I'm not always going to be here for you. I'm not always going to be able to pick up the phone. You need to have other people you can share with. And I have so much appreciation that she said that. I was like, no. But then I, reached out to people in my local Buddhist community. And once I did that just the first time, it was like, oh, actually, this is great. Like they're going to embrace me and treasure me. It was just the first step of like really being able to, challenge that kind of like tendency in my life. But I mean, now it's like, I will reach out immediately and I'm like, I've got a lot of things that I'm struggling with. This is all really hard. Like, please encourage me. One thing I was wondering is, you started this new podcast and the audience is targeted to like younger guys. And I'm wondering how your personal experience relates to the podcast. And like, because I think everyone, but especially young men, like it can feel very like you're not allowed to share, emotions or be really like vulnerable with people.
Yeah. From maybe our parents' generation or grandparents' generation, of course, kind of like gender roles or like what does it mean to be, I think our generation and those of like Gen Z or younger were kind of like breaking all those, know, and I don't think it's a bad thing, I think it's just kind of, it's natural. I think as time goes on, like things change, right? Like culture changes. And I just think we need to be able to like make mistakes, and be okay with learning from them. And actually, Daisaku Ikeda, the Buddhist philosopher, educator, who is my mentor in life, what I've learned from him in his life and his teachings is that actually the biggest mistake to make when we're young is to be afraid to make mistakes and to be so kind of like confined by insecurities or doubts to like ever really figure out who we are with other people. And so for a lot of young guys, I think not to be so I just said we're breaking gender roles, but now I'm kind of for young people in general, you know, like if I look back at my 20s, which, you know, happened very recently, but, you know, I'm no longer in my 20s. I feel like I spent most of that time just like figuring out who I am, you know? And if I'm not honest or open about my struggles and share genuinely with the people around me, I think it's really hard to kind of figure out who you are because you're just always playing like a character, you know, or maybe like part of you. And yeah, I mean, I think our community, our Buddhist community, that's one of the greatest things about it is you just be yourself, you know? And there's like when sometimes people say, hey, if you ever need something, let me know. If it's someone in our community, I trust them 100%. They will be there when I need them, you know? But it wasn't until I opened up about my own struggles where I had firm kind of conviction or confidence in that, because I was so worried like people would think I'm, you know, poor or you know, like dumb or just not worthy of their friendship or something. But that's just all in my own head, you know. I think one thing I found out when I was a young man or as a young man is I'm wrong most of the time, you know. And that's okay. That's great because most of the time I'm thinking something's kind of negative anyway, so like that's wrong, you know? So I think for young guys, it's like, even if you have just a handful of people you can do that with, it severely lessens like our struggles.
Totally.
Like, because you can share it with someone else. And and then it becomes fuel for us to like transform our lives. Like just to bring it back to that story with my dad, after I shared it with these, shared all my struggles with these other gents, there was this moment where I was chanting and I was really thinking about friends in my life and I really wanted them to become happy. And I was really chanting like, you know, I really want them to see this potential they have. You know, we call it the Buddha nature, but like this reservoir or this well of like courage, wisdom, compassion, this infinite resource of like belief in ourselves that we have, that we access through chanting. But then I was chanting, I was like, well, if my friend has all this, doesn't my dad also have all this? Don't I have all? So I was actually opening up to friends allowed me to really transform like how I viewed my father and at that time. And because we'd historically always been close. It was just this rough moment. So our relationship is actually transformed because I was able to really start chanting for my dad's happiness and believing in his potential, you know. But had I never really shared with other guys, I don't know how long that would have taken, you know, or if I'd ever gotten to that point. Because I was so set on just being upset at this one person, you know. And
when like things started to shift with your dad too, like what happened in like your guys' circumstances in terms of like always having 1 month behind on rent and, you know?
Yeah, I think it's because when I was really upset, I would not want to communicate with him, you know? I think many times, actually it's funny, I felt very fraudulent. I would go to these like Buddhist meetings where we talk about dialogue and having courage and I would go home and then run to my room, close the door.
Yep.
Because I was like afraid if I started talking to my dad, like I was really afraid I was going to blow up at him. And I know that was going to make both of us feel bad. And I just didn't want to do that. But I realized is we're in this together. We're father and son. Like it's not just his struggle. It's not just my struggle. Like what we're going through right now, we're together right now, you know? And at some point I may move out, you know? I mean, hopefully I'll move out, you know, start my own life and family and different things. But like while we're living together, like this is a great opportunity to really transform that. And so I realized we just needed to start communicating more. I needed to start communicating more with him, you know, so I'm chanting for his happiness, but at the same time, just being like, all right, so where are we at? You know, what bills do we have coming up next? You know, what's like, and so we would make like it's funny, like when we support meetings behind the scenes, we make like kind of these schedules, right? Like of like, okay, they're timed, right? You know, like, okay, we're going to do this at this time, just so, we respect people's time, right? And the meetings don't go too long or something. I found us like making a schedule, but like on a week to 2 week basis, like, okay, I get paid this day. It's going to boom, 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 what are we going to do the next time? And then, so I was like, wow, yeah, I guess if I never supported behind the scenes, meetings, maybe this wouldn't have even happened too. But I think because of my shift, my interchange to really just support my dad all the way, I think it really shifted something in his life too, because he always had kind of owned his own businesses. He was a lawyer at one point, has a lot of education, really successful in many ways. But actually, what really got us out of the hole we were in is my dad took a job, after a year and a half of something he was well overqualified for, something that I think maybe before this inner transformation happened, he wouldn't have even thought of as like being okay, and he got the job and different things shook out. So like, he's a little older too. So he's getting like some other sources of, income and stuff. And so he ended up actually starting to make more money than me, which was like great.
Wow.
I was like so happy. We saved up, and then we went from like a year and a half or almost 2 years of like always behind to within under 6 months we were like caught up with everything, and I was able to have enough money saved out to get my own apartment. Everything really transformed so fast. But it started with that shift in my praying and my chanting. Yeah.
It's amazing, like thinking about something like finances, like for me, like there are certain kind of goals or things that I chant about that feel like a lot more reasonable, because I'm like, oh, I know that this is like my attitude, okay, I just want to chant to feel joyful today, whatever, versus like, oh, money, like I can't just like snap my fingers and have the money, right? So it can feel like much harder to chant about, but fortunately we can chant about anything.
Yes.
But I think hearing your story, it's interesting that like, it wasn't just like, wow, everything shifted in one day, but like very quickly, because your like inner life had changed and his too, you were able to totally turn the situation around. So it can feel like, oh, there's no path forward, but then you guys easily kind of created a path after that.
Yeah, I think the surface, it's the money, right?
Yeah,
it's the living situation, but I think looking back, fundamentally I had an arrogance towards my father, or I had this kind of idea, I was in my 20s, like I had barely, I'm still figuring things out, but I felt like I knew how my dad should live his life better than he knew he should live his life, which is kind of funny. It's kind of reversed, I guess. Maybe parents should be thinking that for their children, but so for the first half of that time, that's how I was moving, was like, oh man, if only my dad would just do this, this, and this, like everything would be fine, But this inner transformation, everyone's is unique, and everyone, Buddhism teaches that, like, I have my story, Cassidy has her story, my dad has his story. We can't live each other's stories. And so I think fundamentally the issue was, I had to really shift and really look at my dad as someone, not that I was better than or smarter than, but like, he's my dad, like, and really appreciate him. And so I have so much, I'm so happy we went through this. Actually, nothing would have transformed had these obstacles really not come into our life, and it built my own conviction in chanting and this practice as well. Cause if I was like, if I can go through this, I can go through anything,
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, like with pretty much every interview, people always share like, the really difficult kind of pivotal moment in their life. And on the other side, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so appreciative this happened, because my life is so different now, not just like for the externals, yes, but like who I am is so different now. And when you're just starting through a struggle, it's hard to even envision what that might look like. So, if anybody's listening right now and is like in the thick of it, on the other side, there's absolutely this great transformation. I wanted to ask more like about the podcast and maybe like what your guys' inspiration was for it. And so far, have you had like any big takeaways?
Yeah. So the podcast kind of came about, there's three of us. Well, speaking of behind the scenes, we have two great guys that do everything behind the scenes, behind the camera, doing all the like hard work. They know who they are. Thank you to them too. But there's three of us, Shota, Grady, and myself. And, we're all really good friends. Actually, all five of us are good friends, but the three of us, we've been planning a lot of activities and really been talking about how to like share our philosophy more for the last few years. And last year I think the idea of starting a podcast really becoming more prominent, like we were really thinking about just like these unfiltered or more organic sounding kind of conversations. So we just decided, let's just go for it. Enlighten Up Bro was not that name I love so much, not from the three of us. Someone that was a good friend of ours shared that.
Did you have any recommendations that you just want to share now so they can see the light of day?
Okay. Well, I love sorry if this is like, I don't know if this may be triggering, like if people have, I like to drink beer. So I wanted to call it the happy hour.
Oh, that's so
but it was
sweet.
A little like maybe not bro-y enough,
Yeah.
And I think there was a podcast already called that,
Okay.
So I was like, and that's the only idea I kind of could really come up with. I mean, we were like chat GPTing it. We were like, what should it be called? But one guy on one text message said, Enlighten Up Bro. And we were like, oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a little fun fact. But so we started. Actually, it was another trip. I was in New York. The other guys live in New York too, and we kind of did one like in person like this, and talked about setting goals. But yeah, we're trying to address different areas of life, kind of through the perspective of like being a young man now, whether it's being a young father or finances or having dreams or goals, or what does it mean to be a good partner? All these different aspects. Ultimately, they're just aspects of being a human being. But I think through interviewing other guys that are our age or younger, even we've like interviewed some 21-year-olds, but also we've met with guys in their 50s, 60s, 70s who chant, have been chanting for decades and have a lot of life experience and kind of learn from their perspective too. So, and then sometimes it's just the three of us and we joke around and whatever, but we try to, in a humorous, well, I guess that's up for the audience to decide, but hopefully funny, informal way, we can talk about real things that are on everyone's minds, and bring a Buddhist perspective or a Buddhist answer, to maybe some questions. So that's the idea.
I will say I have giggled before listening, giggled out loud, which is rare for me. Maybe it's because I know you guys as well, but I'm always like, oh yeah, I think it's great. So in like any of the interviews, has there been anything for you that was like, oh, whoa, I didn't think about that?
Yeah, so there may be two that stick out. But the first one, we met with this older gentleman. He's been chanting for some 50 years or something. So he has crazy life. It was really great. And I've heard this, before we even started the podcast, but like, and I notice it sometimes in society, but this kind of like this, I don't want to call it like a trend, but maybe this goal to have no problems.
Yeah.
And to kind of just like chill. Maybe it sounds very appealing, but I think the reality is it's not like that, right? So kind of after interviewing this guy, he was basically just sharing, he's like, man, life is problems, man. But he wasn't like down about it. He was just sharing like, you just heard my experience, day one when I was chanting, I had problems. Year 50, I have problems, But he said life is problems, and Buddhism is about becoming a master at problem solving. And like that line really, like, he's like, it's not about do you get problems or not. It's like, how do you behave? How are you as a person? Are you just stressed and like anxious to the max, or are you able to like kind of dig deep and really feel like, okay, got another problem, been through them before, I can do it again. Let's chant, let's figure out a plan, let's take action. We're going to have issues, we're going to have things that come up in our life. Doesn't mean we're a bad person. Doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. In fact, many times it's, from Buddhist perspective, means we're doing something right. But, can we become a problem solver, And I think guys do want to be like that. Maybe even unsolicited, which is why they get in trouble with their partners, because they're always trying to fix their problems. But so that's one thing. And then we interviewed these like 3 21-year-olds, and that was so fun. Like that was already, we've done a few episodes at that point, but they're like way better at being on the mic and in camera. Like, I was like, man, you guys should probably just do the show.
Take it honestly, over.
But one guy was sharing how he's like, what's more for the bros than helping out the bros? Like, that's how he looks at Buddhism. He's like, yeah, let's go to the bar, but let's chant first.
Yeah.
I was like, all right. Yeah, it's a great way to look at life, Just do what you want to do, but, you can practice Buddhism. So those are 2 kind of things that have stuck out,
Yeah.
But every guest we've had, I've learned something for sure.
Totally.
And I've been able to take something myself. I feel very fortunate to even be a host or whatever, because the goal is actually like, it's not really tied to us as hosts. Like, we have to have it, it's something that can be passed off to. So I just feel right now for this time, I feel very fortunate. Like, I'm just learning a lot from many amazing people across the country, and so.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best part of Buddhability is like, I just get to like hear from really incredible people all over. Oh, that's my job. And then I edit it and I get to hear it again. And sometimes I text them, I've been editing and like hearing this part again was exactly what I needed to hear. So definitely feel that. You talked about this problem solving. Yeah. So how would you say that, like, in your daily life today, how does Buddhism help you with problem solving?
So we talk about karma a lot, right? And there's other philosophies that talk about karma. But one aspect about, Nichiren Buddhism that I really like is that, like, we choose our karma. Like, we choose, like we're in the driver's seat of our own lives, if we choose to be, It's a little philosophical. It's kind of like maybe a little heady, so apologize. But I think when I can come to terms, like when I'm chanting and I can really like feel like, yes, I'm the driver's seat of my life, then there's no problem that I can't overcome, because if it feels like I'm just in the back seat of some, like Uber of life, or, whatever, like someone else is driving, then I'm just going wherever it's going to go. Like, I have no say. But so I think in that sense, I believe, through chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, through studying, the Nichiren Daishonin's philosophy, writings of Daisaku Ikeda, and talking to friends in our community, there's nothing we can't overcome. And then to add that one step further, I firmly believe that when you help other people, support others while you're going through problems, is the surest and quickest way to actually pull ourselves out of something. I think there's this human tendency to be like, I would love to help that person, but I got some stuff going on right now, so let me get this all figured out, and then I can help that person, But what I come to realize is there's always going to be something going on,
That time will never come.
Yeah. Or if I don't help this person, it's going to take a lot longer to figure that out, So I try to use, problems as fuel for me to actually be a better friend, to be a better son, to be a better employee, be a better, just whoever I am in that moment, wherever I am in that moment, like, I got to do my best, and really cherish the person in front of me. And I think that it attaches my life to something bigger than just like this like small problem I have, but actually like, wow, I have so many things going on in my life. Like, I just have this tiny little problem, So I think Buddhism has helped me in that way. Yeah, like I still have insecurities, I still have doubts, like I still have I wouldn't say like financial problems, but I suck at saving money, like, which I'm coming to find is a behavioral thing of mine that I need to be better at. So, I still have things that like I'm worried about or can cause me to worry. But I just chant until I believe in myself, and then I go out the door and I do my best that day, So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hope that is okay.
Oh, that was perfect. That was great.
Sorry, can I one
yes,
last thing?
Please.
Sorry, because I think that question, it was a great question. I'm still thinking about it, but I think one thing I've learned from Buddhism too is that problems are in our life to help teach us something too. Yes. Like the aspects that can be polished or that we've always wanted to maybe grow in. Whether it's in relationships, work, family, all these different aspects. I think problems, that's why you end up appreciating them. It's like, wow, had I not gone through that, maybe I would still be worried about this one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely. No, please. Anytime. I mean, we are at the end, but you can still interrupt me. So my final question every interview is a piece of advice. So this is a kind of a two-part question, actually. So because, you support many young guys, you're doing the podcast, what have you noticed as some really common struggles that young guys face, and what advice do you give them?
One question we've got, because on the podcast, sometimes we ask guys to submit a question, and we kind of center our dialogue or our discussion on it. So a couple times we've gotten something similar to this, but also, when I've just met with other guys, whether they chant or they don't chant, but it's kind of making a decision about what to do in life. Life can be a series of kind of forks in the road, oh, do I go to college? Do I not? Then after college or in college, what do I study? After college, do I go to grad school? Do I go to work? So there's life is a series of choices, right? I think a lot of maybe young guys are kind of worried about, are they choosing the right path? And one thing I've noticed in my own life, and also I think with talking with my friends, is when you're so stuck on the choice about or worrying about which is the right choice, whatever you're doing in that moment, you're not actually doing your best in, because you're kind of worried, or maybe you kind of half commit to something, but you're still thinking about this other option. Maybe that was the better choice, But what I've learned through this practice is whatever choice you make, just do your best at. And by doing our best, we learn something, whether it's a subject in school or if it's a job, maybe it's a practical skill. But I think also we learn something about ourselves, and we can commit to something. And maybe that opens up a new door into a new door, because I think we try to we want to see point A to point B in our head. But the reality is I'm very limited in what I know. There's so many possibilities to get to this point, to get to the future. So I think just, when you find yourself at a fork in the road, of course, get to a point where you're just make a choice and just do your best and live each day, go to bed tired, you should be tired when you go to bed, you did a lot. And I think we'll never have regrets that way, because we're going to know we gave it our all. Just make a commitment, to something that you believe in. I believe in Nichiren Buddhism and helping, in our SGI community. So I made a commitment to it, and I go to bed feeling fulfilled. What more can I ask, Daisaku Ikeda talks about how Buddhism is to make up our mind. We can use Buddhism to make up our minds. And also in the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, the founder of our philosophy, he talks about when a person is at cross purposes with themselves, they will achieve nothing. And he says, you must simply make up your mind. It's interesting how he says simply, even though sometimes it's the hardest thing to do. But, these ideas of if we're windshield wiping back and forth about what we should do, we'll never go anywhere. But Buddhism is that we can just make a choice, go all in, and from there, other opportunities will sprout. And but I think once you make up your mind, you just got to go all in on it. And it's scary, and maybe it's a little leap of faithy in a sense, but that's why I think what you shared earlier, Cassidy, we call someone, tell them that we're struggling, but we want to go with this choice, and we have support, and we just got to make a choice, But I think chanting helps us make a choice from not a place of worry, but of a place of hope, and strength, and then we make the right choice that way.